Live streaming is on.
Sì, benvenuti a tutti. Come sapete, questo evento si terrà in lingua inglese, quindi adesso passo immediatamente all'inglese. So, hi everybody, and welcome to this panel and discussion within the CodeFest calendar. It's a great honor. So I'm Vincenzo Cruppi, and I'm going to present our two main speakers, John Cayley and Teresa Numerico. So this is called 6 Codes in Search of an Author. And yes, that was a sort of funny and creative way to introduce a number of different issues that we would like to put together and connect together today. So let me start out with John Cayley. John Cayley is now a professor at Brown University, and well, his path is extremely rich across different fields. So it's not going to be so easy to tell, because he's been working on something called digital language art, and this is a way to project, to create projects, and also to carry out a theoretical analysis of a number of related things connecting with coding, for sure, the employment of digital techniques, and also a reflection on art and human creativity. And he's been doing this in these two ways, both ways, as a creator on the one hand, and as a thinker and as a analyst, let's say, on the other hand. So he's going to be the first one to talk and present today. And afterwards, we're going to have Teresa Numerico. Teresa Numerico is a philosopher, but she's been working on artificial intelligence and other issues connected with the digital world and problems that arise in recent times with a widespread employment of such tools. So I think the best way to go is just give the word to John and see what we can get from his presentation. Thank you again for being here.
Well, it's a pleasure, and thank you very much for inviting me, and Stefano. I wanted to check, there's no way I can share a chat with or a link with people, or a screen. No. Sorry? I can't hear you.
Enzo, non ti sentiamo. We cannot hear you.
You can't hear me?
No, yes, we can hear John, but not Enzo, who was speaking.
No, I can't hear you. I'll just continue. Right.
If you need to show something, some slides or something.
No, I don't need to.
Okay.
I just wanted to know if it was possible, and I just wanted to know if I could share a link, for instance. Oh, you can.
Share a link. You can put it in the chat.
Okay.
And then I don't know. I will try to show in my screen.
Okay.
Give me the link in the chat.
Okay.
The fourth icon. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I'll do it in a minute. I'll get going first, because it seems like a good idea to get going. So I'm going to be talking mainly about the relationship, I guess, between code and language. My practice I call digital language art, but it's primarily language art. In other words, language is the medium that I work in. The digital part is a sort of adjective which is widely used that describes it assumes that in some way my poetry or writing is going to appear in an electronic context. That's all it really means. But I don't find that satisfying. I'm interested in the way that computation, as opposed to the digital, everything is digital these days, so it doesn't mean very much. I'm more interested in the way that computation can engage with the practice of language. And that brings up all sorts of problems, for me anyway. So I'd prefer to drop the digital and just be talking about language art. And then there would be a number of us, artist practitioners, who were interested to use coding, to use computation in order to make objects in language. And clearly, there's certain things that you can do in the digital world that we've become used to that you can't do as easily anyway in the world of the book. And so that was something that sort of got me going on this path. In terms of what I'm going to talk about, I'm just going to make use of a number of questions that Stefano kindly supplied me with. I'm going to speak about 4 different areas of the work that I've done. I'm going to talk about an essay that I wrote some time ago called "The Code is Not the Text Unless It Is the Text." And then I'm going to talk about a project called the Reader's Project, which is a way of aestheticizing reading using computation. And then I'm going to talk about a little bit, probably only for a very short time, about the Listeners, a project I made for the Alexa, the Amazon's Alexa, which I think is in Italian now. And so we should get translating. And finally, I want to talk about the main thing I want to talk about is the way I'm coding now, using a notebook platform, a live coding notebook platform. I'm using the one called Observable, which is devoted to the coding stack of the web. And I think it opens up coding to non-coders in a way which used to be the case in the past and became no longer the case when software tried to take over, and they're still always trying to take over. So that's a lot to talk about. I'm going to try and, I guess, speak clearly because I'm aware that some of my audience will not necessarily be totally fluent in English, and I apologize for not being able to express myself in Italian. And I hope that what I say will be of some interest. So first, the code is not the text unless it is the text. So this was something that came to me early on in my career when there was a lot of talk, and there still is a lot of talk about a fascination with code, which in certain computer languages is English-like. And therefore the people who write saw expressive possibilities in computer languages. They were called languages as if they are languages. In my view, they are not languages. They are formal languages if you want, but they're not language in the sense that humans create and are created by language. So the sort of the impetus in certain types of artistic people to mix code and language as if they were the same thing, and as if what they were producing as a sort of as an amalgam or mixture was for me a problem, because my sense of it was that I was using code in order to make a sort of machine that would be a new way of generating or modulating or changing language. But it wouldn't be, the code itself wouldn't necessarily be part of the language that was created to be read. So there's a distinction between what is to be read as the language art and the code that helps that language art to exist, or allows that language art to exist. And so I wrote this essay trying to make clear that distinction should be at least borne in mind, which is not to say that people don't make lovely poetry using words from coding languages. And it's also not to say that people don't embed language within code itself. It's just to say that computer languages, are not language. And there's constant confusion about this, because everybody uses language. Everybody kind of thinks they know what it is. And when they encounter something that looks like language, they think, oh, well, that must be language. I say that it isn't language until it's read. I don't mean literally read. I mean read to understand it. I say the language doesn't exist until it is part of a dialogue with another human, a human creature, a language animal is how I think of it. We are language animals, and language as such is specific to our species, and what we do is contiguous with what animals do, but language is something that animals do not have, this particular faculty. Neither do machines. Machines do not have language, not the language that we have. And until that's proven otherwise, I would continue to maintain that. Why don't they have language? Because they're not embodied yet. They're not part of our world. Our language comes into our world by the fact that we have it. We evolved to have it. And machines have not yet evolved to have language. I mean, we could possibly develop them to the point where they have something like language. But for the foreseeable future, it's going to be a simulation. It's going to be something that looks like language. It's going to be potential language. So, for instance, that means that all of what is produced by artificial intelligence, machine learning programs, all of what is produced by them as language is actually just text that may or may not be read by humans. But it's not language as such, because the machine is not reading it as they produce it. And the same is true of code. Code is not language. It's just a set of commands. It's just a list of commands to generate something that becomes sort of meaningful marks for humans, which may be language, or it might be pretty pictures. But the code itself is not language. The confusion will be very powerful, and for me, one of the most interesting confusions available to us at the moment is if you happen to have access to the new GPT-3 AI interface, the sort of playground that OpenAI has given to us to play with these big models. There's one now called Codex, which allows you to speak ordinary language, which you're intending to produce a program, and it's amazing. It's extraordinary what you're saying. You say things like, "Find an image of a spaceship," and so and it'll go away and it'll get the code. It'll search Google to find an image of a spaceship, and then get the URL and then stick it into the code as a piece of JavaScript. And then you say, center the spaceship in the middle of the screen, and then it'll generate the code that will center the spaceship in the middle of the screen. Then it'll say, move this spaceship back and forth, bouncing off the sides of the window, and it'll generate the JavaScript to do that. And you think, amazing, I'm talking to a machine. But you're not. What you're doing is you're using a special register of English, which is a set of commands. And shock horror, when you speak a list of commands, that's very easy to translate into actual register code, an actual program of code, because that's what coding is. It's a list of commands that are expected to be executed by the machine. But you think you've interacted with something that's very intelligent. It's not intelligent in the way that humans are intelligent. It's just very good at doing what it normally does. And you're not particularly good at it. And if you do a not particularly good job, it'll help you to do a better job of what it's very good at. Anyway, okay, so that's, I'm gonna draw a line under that and say that I've finished talking about code and text for the moment. And I'm going to go on to speak about a particular project. At a certain point, I'm going to try and pull up a URL to a document where Stefano's questions are that you can check. Perhaps I'll do that now. So excuse me, I'm now looking at my, you can still see me, I'm looking at my screen to try and find a particular document to get the URL. It'll take me a little while, and this will be very boring. Okay, here we are. Here's the URL to the document. And I hope that people can get access to that at some point. Okay, now I'm going to go on to talk about the Readers Project. The useful thing about Stefano's questions is that they have links to all of these things. So you can follow the links and find the code is not the text, or the Readers Project. Better accelerate. The Readers Project is you imagine a page. Oh, that's nice. You imagine a page, and then you imagine words being highlighted on the page, and a little sort of, it's as if an entity is moving across the page in order to read it, but they're not reading it going across, scanning and like this. They're reading it in a strange order. And myself and my collaborator, Daniel Howe, developed a number of these readers that have different ways of moving through the text that are motivated differently to the way humans are motivated when they read, or that's the supposition. And the interesting aspect of this, apart from trying to make it look pretty or poetic, because it takes a text that is maybe somebody else's writing, or maybe an essay, and by changing the order, by the reader moving through it in a different way, it changes it into an alternative reading, which may or may not be poetic or beautiful, or that's the idea. So this was both a way to aestheticize reading and making it a little bit of a spectacle, but also to investigate, for me anyway now, what reading is. So again, it's like the little readers who are moving through computationally the text are not reading like humans read. They're reading like little machines, not very intelligent machines, by the way, not as intelligent as machine learning, but nonetheless using techniques from natural language processing using things like Markov chains and whatnot to read through the text in a quasi-interesting way, in a way that is sort of disturbing. So that is what we did with the Readers Project, and you can see the link. It's a bringing together of human reading and machine reading to see whether that sort of potentially agonistic meeting might generate a little bit of aesthetic interest. Then I'll draw a line under that one. Now we'll go on to the listeners. The listeners is a project for I told you, a digital assistant, a voice activated digital assistant. This was a major discovery for me, that when voice recognition became robust, in other words, it worked, and speech synthesis became not so bad, not so robotic, then what happened was that the various sort of pseudo language generating processes suddenly, Stefano, yes, if you want to share the contents, that's fine, but probably it's up to you. If so if we go down to the listeners, so my impetus here was that artificial pseudo language had been given a voice, and the voice is one of the marks, one of the essential marks of human embodiment. In other words, everybody has a voice, and it's unique to that person, and it's a function of the fact that they're embodied. And it is, after all, the sort of the main site for most people of what language is. It brings language into being, the voice. So once machines are given a plausible voice, they get to live in your house. You get to bring them into your house. You can ask them simple questions and they'll respond. I still take this to be an extraordinary moment historically. Like this has already changed everything and will continue to change everything, because the voice has entered into the position of being graspable by computation, by contemporary computation. And so the speculation is that it will change our relationship with language forever. Maybe not our relationship with language, that's wrong, but our relationship with literature forever. Just let that siren pass, because we will be able to do with the oral, what you can hear, language that you can hear, the same sort of things that you can do with literature. In other words, you can capture it, you can move around in it, you can index it, you can you can transact with it, and that's happening, and that will continue to happen. And so one of the things I wanted to do by experimenting with making something for the digital assistant Alexa, Amazon's, was to experiment with that and to see what it meant to try and make, again, a language art object using digital, using this new type of engagement with language. I must be almost finishing my time. It's funny because I can't. I don't feel totally in contact with the rest of my panelists. But can I a little bit more? Is a little bit more okay?
Yeah, sure.
It's up to you.
It's up to me. Okay, so very quickly. Finally, I want to, as a way of, as Stefano puts it, to if you're interested in developing some sort of relationship between language and code, then you need to have a platform that allows people who are not necessarily experts in code, but who are experts in language, to develop a relationship with it. That used to be possible back in the day. The days of the Apple, when Apple just made it possible to program their computers, and then they made it very difficult, and only professionals can do it. The web, same thing. Used to be very easy to make web pages. Then it became very difficult. But now with these notebooks, and observablehq.com is the one that I find very exciting. You can have, with no install. No need to install a development environment. Anybody can go in to a notebook platform and can start to write and start to code at the same time and mix coding and writing together and then learn to combine the two. So I don't really have anything, I mean, I could go on theoretically about this, but but I think that it's fascinating that the web stack, the stack that allows people to make web objects, which is the place where we encounter the most products of computation, has been reopened such that anyone can do it. So what I hope is that the people who are interested in philosophy and aesthetics and language art will take this opportunity and go in and learn enough coding in order to change their own practices within the realm of language. And also the people who make coding, make objects that include code, will also use it to expose the code so that the code can be read, in the sense that the code can be seen, copied, adapted, and used by other people in the way that coders do, and also appreciated by critics for what it contributes to the text to be read, the poem, or the dynamic piece of writing that can be made using a screen that allows you to move words around or introduce audiovisual material and integrate it with your art. So I feel I've said a lot and gone on for a long time, and I apologize for that, and I hope it hasn't been too much for whoever is listening out there, but I'll bring it to a close there. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, that's reassuring. Okay, so there was lots of different things in there, and I'm sure people can appreciate that through the link itself, and we can think about that. I hope later on. I was wondering whether Teresa is also there.
Yes, so, I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
The necessary.
Okay, so there were lots of references to coding, programming, and digital systems doing things, and humans interacting with that. So I suppose it's the right time to give you the word. Just let us know if you have anything. Do you have anything to share?
No. Good. There is only one thing worse than the webinar is the webinar with the slides.
The floor is yours.
In my view, I'm completely exhausted with the distance speaking, so I prefer to avoid slides, etc., even if probably it is more difficult to follow for me. Anyway, for me it's impossible to handle the slides and the distance together. First of all, I want to thank the organizers for the invitation to this webinar, which is very stimulating, thought-provoking. I found the previous talk very interesting, and I think that probably I can say something that has to do with the talk with your talk, John, and maybe we can discuss it later. I want to talk about, let's say, I want to talk about GPT-3 system, and I want to talk about what does it mean to consider an AI system to be intelligent. And I also want to talk about what will happen if we delegate all the written and part of the spoken text to a machine in future. Let's say that writing was not born with the Homo sapiens. It was born much later. Let's say, according to archaeologists, about 5,000 years ago. So it is a reasonably recent technology. And it is possible, as it was started, it is possible that human beings will lose it as a skill, as their skill. They can sort of handle it to the machines, but we don't know what will happen at that point. And that I will close my talk giving some thoughts about what will happen if we handle our written skills to the machines. But I want to start with a sort of with something that can seem to be not connected with the rest of the talk, but I think that it is connected. I will try to show that it is connected. And my, let's say, my first part of the talk will be about the myth of Echo and Narcissus by Ovid. In this myth, it is written in the Metamorphosis. They were myths that were there even before Ovid decided to write them down. Anyway, Echo was a nymph that was punished by Hera because she always chatted too much, and she distracted Hera when she wanted to find out the Zeus was betraying her. So Echo was distracting Hera, and by distracting Hera, didn't allow her to let's say, to kept Zeus while he was betraying her. And so Hera decided to punish Echo by, let's say, let her losing her capability of speaking, of proper speaking. She could only, let's say, repeat what other speakers were saying to her. So she was, she could speak, but she could not say something of her own. She could just use words that other people were using in front of her. She was in love with, she fell in love with the Narcissus, but Narcissus, of course, didn't fell in love with her, while Narcissus fell in love with his own image reflected in the water lake where he was. According to Ovid, Narcissus myth was not related to our psychoanalytic, let's say, approach to Narcissus. Everybody knows very well what does it mean to be narcissistic, etc., etc. The problem of Narcissus, according to Ovid, was his incapability of distinguish between images and reality. So he was he fell in love with his own image because he couldn't realize that it was his own image. So it's not that it was its own image, his own image, and that was the center of the problem. The center of the problem, according to Howe, I have here the citation, but I don't want to take too much time with it, is that he was not capable of distinguish reality from image. And by doing so, he was at the end. His life was taken off because he was not capable of moving inside reality correctly, because he mistakenly took his image for another person. So what happens here? Why I want to mention Echo and Narcissus? Because I think that Echo and Narcissus represented two critical attitude with our relationship with representation, words and images. The problem that we face when we do not understand that our representations are not the reality. We are, let's say, using representation in order to understand and in order to inhabit our world. But we can do it only if we consider that representation does not exhaust our world, is not completely exhaustive about what we need to know about our world, our reality. I don't want to use reality like this because it's a kind of charged term for philosophers. So I try to avoid to use it too much. But let's say something that is outside ourselves, and we need to relate to it in order to survive. Let's put it in very generic terms. So representation is useful for our life because it allows a symbolic triadic relationship with our world. There is us, there is our representation, and there is something else that our representation let us manage, let's say. But this is the case if we understand that our representations are not the word. Narcissus was not able to do this, to distinguish between the two, and was blocked. It was paralyzed by the fact that he could not detect that there was a difference between his representation, the image that was in front of his eyes, and the rest of the object in the world. Now, what has happened with the deification is doing something very crucial, very critical, very powerful. Digitalization is, let's say, is transforming our world into a digital representation. Okay, so when we use sensors, when we use profiling in order to advertise the correct messages to each of us, this is due to the fact that our digital representation is very similar to our real, let's say, our real desires, our description, the description of what we want, of what we are, and our expectations are embedded in our digital profile. So we are, let's say, the digital representation is sort of very similar, more and more similar with how we behave. No, we can represent our behavior by our digital footprint. And moreover, digital representations not only is very similar to our real desires, expectation, etc., but is machine readable, which is something very relevant. So it's not only that it resembles us, but it can be handled completely automatically by the machine, via the machine. And sometimes this digital representation is not handled by human beings, but just by machines. When, for example, we have the image recognition tools, all these images are not in control, are not in the eyes of the human beings, are not interpreted by human beings, but they are interpreted directly by machines. So there is this representation, but this representation is not under human control, and for the machines there is nothing which is external to the digital representation. For the machine, the digital representation is their world. Machines can only deal with digital representations, but they consider digital representation as their own reality. And this is also true for GPT-3 tools. GPT-3 tools is very powerful, as John were saying before. It is very powerful. It is very, let's say, is capable of behaving as if it was managing languages. But this is due to the fact that there are all these corpora that are available online in digital format, so that the GPT-3 can be trained. And those corpora, those textual corpora, are created by human beings, not by machines, but they are readable by the machines because they are in digital format. So digital format is a special kind of representation. It's a new kind of representation that allows machines to deal with those representations without any intermediation. Okay, they need that human beings created those texts, but then once they are created in digital format, they don't need machines don't need any other mediation, any other symbolic governance, let's say, from the external agents like human beings. So the triadic relationship can be in place, but we are not in control of the signification or the let's say, what the meaning that we attribute to this representation, because they are managed completely by the machines. Now, when Alan Turing talked about what is, according to him, machine intelligence, he was prepared to tell. He told us two very relevant things. One thing was that intelligence is a social concept, so there is no unique definition for intelligence. We attribute intelligence to an agent, human or artificial as it is, according to what the machine, the device can do, and according to our knowledge about the device or our ignorance about the procedure behind the behavior of the device. So this means that the more we are expert, the more we understand what the mechanism there is inside the machine, the less we are prepared to attribute intelligence to it. The less we are expert, the more we are prepared to attribute intelligence to the device. So if the intelligence is a social notion, and if we are not expert about the majority of people are not expert about what's going on inside the mechanism, then we tend to attribute more easily intelligence to the devices. That's, according to my humble opinion, this is what he meant when we proposed the Turing test in order to detect if a machine was intelligent or not, because he was underlining the fact that the jury had to be made by an expert judges, people that are not involved in the organization, in the technical organization of the machine. And this jury needed to be taken in by the behavior of the machine in order for the test to be considered accomplished by the machine. So this means that we are intelligence is a social notion, and we attribute it according to our decision that has to do also with our ignorance. The second assumption that Turing was suggesting is that we do not have to consider that machines need to be more intelligent than the humankind. Machines will be more intelligent than some people, and obviously there are always some human beings which will be more intelligent than some machines. But this is not the problem, according to Turing, as far as some machines can behave in ways that are more intelligent than a group of human beings. So this is another interesting suggestion that Turing is offering us, because of course there are a lot of things that machines can do better than many of us. And there are always people who are programming machines that must be more intelligent than machines in order to program them to accomplish intelligent behavior. But this is not the problem. We can accept the fact that they are intelligent machines, as far as many of the people are not able to understand what's going on behind the machine and are prepared to attribute intelligence to something that they don't know how to describe, how to understand. So then Wiener suggested that the potential danger of the use of digital technologies relied not really on the possibility of the general artificial intelligence, the possibility that there will be a machine that is more intelligent than all the people and can, let's say, take the control over humanity. But the risk, according to Wiener, was based on the possibility of that the machine. Let's say, I will read the citation because I think it's very relevant to our discourse. The real danger of the machine is the quite different one that such machines, though helpless by themselves, may be used by human beings, or a block of human beings, to increase their control over the rest of the human race, or that political leaders may attempt to control their populations by means not of the machines themselves, but through political techniques as narrow and indifferent to human possibility as if they had, in fact, been conceived mechanically. The dominance of the machines presupposes a society in the last stages of increasing entropy, where probability is negligible and where statistical differences among individuals are nil. Fortunately, we have not reached such a state. So the problem was not the general artificial intelligence, but was more the tendency to transform people into agents that can be predictable. If the tools are able to transform people into predictable agents, then at that point, digital machines can overcome humanity, not because they are more powerful or more intelligent, but because human beings are less creative, let's say, and less unpredictable, and so they can be anticipated, predicted, and controlled by machines. So I don't have a lot of time, but I want to say something about GPT-3 language model. I said something at the beginning. GPT-3 is a very advanced digital technology language model that uses deep learning to produce an understanding of human-like languages. It's the most relevant, most successful tool in natural language processing, and it's trained on trillions of bit by text, corpora text, and it has I don't know how many. I had here the. I can't find here the detail, the technical details, but anyway, it's a huge industrial enterprise effort. 175 billion parameters are used in order to interpret languages, plus the corpora that are used to train the device. Of course, there are a lot of problems in GPT-3 tools too. The capability, the tendency to behave like, to implement, to embed discrimination and biases that are embedded within in the text that I used for the training, for example, and the collapse of the context, of course. So as John was saying before, it's not true that the machine is able to manage to use a language. But it is able to deceive as if it were capable of managing a language. So according to Turing definition, it is intelligent, because it is able to behave in such a way that you are not, if you are not expert enough, you cannot detect if it is a bot that is in front of you or if it is a human being. According to Frank Pasquale, in his book New Laws of Robotics, it is necessary that we avoid this detection, this deception, and oblige companies that use bots to explicit that they are bots. So it's not, it should not be legal to interact with a bot without know that it is a bot. But at the moment, there is no obligation in this sense. So I would say that there are two different directions towards machine intelligence. One direction is that, of course, machines perform intelligent tasks so that they are comparable to human beings, or even more clever, and they are enhanced compared to human beings. But there is also the possibility that that human beings are skilled so much that they do not, that they are not able to detect if the machine is a machine or if it's a human being. So it is possible to achieve machine intelligence also by the skilling the humans. If all the text are, let's say, if GPT-3 or a more even an enhanced machines is able to manage writing so that you cannot detect if it's written by human being or if it's written by the machine, and if human beings are, at the moment there are a lot of human beings that are not able to write. Let's say they're not that are not capable of writing, or they are capable of writing in a language that is not hegemonic enough. So it is as if they were not capable of writing. What will happen at that point if the human beings let's say, are not able to write anymore, or are not interested in writing anymore? Consider that all the writing is done by the machine. what would happen to society? We have to think about it, because writing came into society and can get out society. I don't know. I have a couple of suggestions, but I don't know, because it's difficult to say what the future will be, and if the future will be that we are not capable of writing anymore as a society. What I want to suggest is that I don't think it's a very good idea that we handle the representation, the control of representation to the machines, considering that representation, the digital representation, is more and more embedded inside the world as it is. So it is always we need representations, maps, etc., were, let's say, part of our world and transformed our world. But in this case, if we handle the representation to the machine and we, let's say, abandon the idea of controlling this, the representation methodology that is behind digital world, then we face some new, a new world, a new situation, a new environment in which it is difficult to predict which will be our place as human beings. Sorry to be so late.
Thank you, Teresa. Okay, so I suppose that you might want to comment on each other's intervention. I thought I might start out with a very general remark, maybe too general, but maybe this is useful for you to map it onto your contribution. So it seems like both of you have been somehow suggesting some distinctions. Some of these distinctions sounded like sharp enough. And on the other hand, I think both of you have pointed out that as an effect of these powerful technologies, right, starting out from coding up to all its effects. So as an effect of these powerful technologies, we are also, we must be prepared to see changes in our relationship with like certain activities like reading, writing, talking, listening, understanding, and so on. So I have a feeling that there might be a bit of a tension between these two things. So we need to make distinctions in order to make sense of what's going on in these areas. On the other hand, if we are somehow bound to see changes, quite radical changes somehow, like maybe language disappearing or changing in a radical way, or coding changing because machines can do that, and so on and so forth. So I was wondering whether these two things, how can we put them together, and how this might play out with your approach to the many issues that have been raised. But I mean, that was just a very general thought, a philosopher's thought. Surely too much of a philosophy thing, but you'll tell me. So John.
Yeah, I think I can speak to that. Thank you very much for your talk, Teresa. I really agree with very, very much of it. In terms of Enzo's question, the problem for me is tied up, I think, with something that Teresa brought up, which is the question of expertise, right? The humans should be worried, but they can't do anything about it because things are going to change. What should they do? Who's going to tell them what to do? Which is part of the problem for me. And because the experts are the judge, the so-called experts are the judge of what intelligence is in the case of what Teresa was addressing, and also to an extent what I'm addressing, because I'm using language, writing, right, which is the mark of intelligence, right? It's where intelligence is expressed in the world. So if I was asked to make what's the most important distinction, the most important distinction is between writing and language, right? That writing is not language. We agree on this because we could lose writing. We don't need writing as such. We need some sort of archive for society. It might not be writing in the future, and it might be what the machines tell us it is. But language as such could not be taken away from us. But it couldn't even be taken. In other words, there are many people who are not experts, but are nonetheless makers of language an illiterate, a person so-called illiterate, or a person who speaks a language that is not hegemonic enough. That person is nonetheless has all of the faculty of language that they need to be fully expressive in the real world, the world in which they have to survive, as Teresa put it. And so that is something that humans could hold on to, regardless of the changes that are being forced on them by digitalization and by the progress of something that is being brought to them by experts who, in my not so humble opinion, are not experts, right? They're experts in formulation. They're experts in sort of ideas about language and theories about language, but that doesn't make them experts in language in the real world.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, Teresa, do you want to add something?
No, yes, I want to understand better what you mean by with your question. Do you mean there are differences between the two of us, or there are differences between human beings and machines, or writing?
No, right. I was thinking about certain distinctions that you've been doing within your own contribution. So, for instance, language, not language, human or not human intelligence, and also, like, it looks like there is a role for, well, there is a difference between understanding and production in language, which is it's not been explicitly employed, but it sort of went through some of the remarks that you made. And I was wondering, as I said, so given that we are expecting important changes, we've been facing already, right? We've been seeing ourselves important changes in our practices as these technologies develop. I was wondering whether you see a potential tension between us drawing such distinctions in order to understand the phenomena, and us, potentially seeing important transformations in the near future. That was the rough idea. Is that
okay? No, well, I don't think my talk was meant to be a bit provocative. I'm not saying that this should be the scenario, not that this will be the scenario. I'm just saying that I'm just suggesting that if we do nothing, this could end up. We could end up with this scenario, but this is not necessary. This is not. We are not. I'm not suggesting that this is the unique possibility. What I'm saying is that we have to think carefully about what is rationality, what we want, if and how we want to preserve pluralism, and how we can preserve pluralism within the digital environment, which tends for its shape, for its own construction toward a standardization of representation, of the use of language, of categorization tools, pattern recognition, etc., etc. We haven't spoken about that, but it's more general. We're speaking about language, but it's not only a matter of language. It's a matter of decision making. It's a matter of infrastructure organization. There are a lot of issues going on, and I'm suggesting that that this technology that was historically invented no more than 70 years ago, during or let's say immediately after, I would say, the Second World War, is not the unique technology in which we want and we have to live. And we have to preserve the multiplicity, the pluralism of the human beings, because human beings, one of the crucial capabilities of the human beings, one that allowed the human beings to survive so many years in critical conditions, in all sorts of different conditions, is the capability of let's say, to react quickly to the new situation, the new unpredictable events. Digital technology is not very clever to deal with unpredictable events. So if we rely completely on this technology, we risk to lose one of the characteristics that were so fit, that made us so fit for survival. So we have to think about it very clearly and very deeply. Which this does not mean that we don't have to use digitalization, but we have to decide where we want to apply it and where we don't want to apply it. We have to decide if we want to understand when we are speaking with the bot, or we don't want to understand if we are speaking with the bot or not, if this must be regulated or not. So this is we haven't spoken about socio-technical components of technologies, no? But technologies not just technical devices, are all social. They are made by social components, regulatory components. So we have to decide how we want to deal with all these different layers in order to keep our some of the characteristics that made us so capable for survival. I didn't spoke about, for example, the energy draining of these devices, which is a problem for climate change, for example. So human brain is is more economic in terms of energy and energy consumption compared to machines.
Sure. Okay, thank you. So I think there was a question in the chat, and I think Stefano probably might help me.
Yes.
Phrase it.
I will try, but I will try to make my question with the question in the chat. So I will put that question in a broader context. Briefly. So there are a lot of philosophers in this room. So I will start with an Aristotelian beginning. Major premise. Major premise: language is born when two animals meet. Okay. Minor premise: programmers are animals. Conclusion, John. First, this is the first. It's just a joke, but not so a joke. I go a little bit beyond. You, John, were cited in a previous session with Mark Marino from the Southern California University and Matthew Fowler from Goldsmith in London about your essay about code is text is not a text. We started from this because that essay was really a point of starting for a lot of studies and reflection and laboratories and webinars and so on. So the question is, what do you think about critical code studies now, after 20 years? Is it true, this is my question, is it true that while programming language are not language, and while codes are not texts, but the practice, the human practice in writing text, reading, rewriting, sharing, selling, stealing, tricking about, are those practices similar between what the programmers do and what other humans do? So you are clearly you have put a distinction, and I totally agree with you, but not in my opinion, but the question is, can we try to draw relationships between these two words? Finally, it's a little bit outside. You speak about orature. I like very much this word. It's a little bit complicated to translate. I don't know how to translate in Italian. It's a new word, literature or orature. So it's clear, but it's not. I cannot find a correct translation. So speaking and hearing, not writing and reading. Okay, but this means that the next place, the next space, the next platform where coding will take place will be audio, voice, in your opinion?
So I take that for two questions, yeah.
No, I mess up with my question. I agree with you, but anyway, I think you understood what was.
Anyway, I'm going to treat it as two questions. I'm going to talk about critical code studies. I'll try and do this quickly, which is just to say that I'm very, very much in favor of critical code studies, but what that would mean for me is sort of in the same way that literary criticism works. You know, you have the text that is read, and then there's a lot going on. If the author is a sophisticated author, or the author function is sophisticated, there's an awful lot going on. So, you know, there's lots of room for deconstruction, for historicism, for contextualization, all the rest of it. And that is totally accepted in literary criticism, depending on what type of literary criticism you do. The idea that you read, as they say, symptomatically, that the text is just a symptom of something else. That's like it's like a no-brainer for most literary critics. Critical code studies, it should be, if there are you know, objects that are not only digitalized, but they have digital affordances, or they have engines that are coded and they're made by code, then that code is accessible to be critically read, and to see how that code contributes to what is happening in the text, and how that changes the text to be read. And it's also, you can also critique it in terms of how good it is, right? In the same way that, you know, you might critique an author for bad research. In other words, they've produced something which is historically embedded, but it's done badly, right? So you can expose that, or it's done extremely well. So the same thing with code. You can find code that is banal. It produces an interesting result, nice novel, bad code. That seems to me, so critical code studies is a long way to go before it is totally valuable without engaging with the overlap. And then what you said about the sort of the culture of coding and the culture of writing. And I was talking to students about this very recently, where I was advocating to writers that they should do what coders do. It's not as if William Burroughs and Kathy Acker didn't suggest it previously. Style, collage, intertext, all the rest of it. Writers have done this, but it's considered to be a little bit not really what writers should do. Whereas in the world of coding, it's great, and it's great, and it's regulated differently, and it's got sophisticated tools. And so if those that sort of culture, that culture of practice gets translated from one to the other, back and forth, then that would be great. And that's why I think a platform like Observable is so good, because you can have both of them together, working together at the same time, and you can see what one and the other, what each type of practice is doing for the other in real time, and collaboratively if you want. So that's the answer. My answer to that. On the question of orature, right? That this is something which speaks to the whole sort of philosophical undertone of the discussion, because when I'm talking about orature, I'm to be provocative, I'm attacking literature. I'm saying, really? Literature is where language art is happening on the planet now? No, literature is happening in a very, very small, privileged proportion of the planet. Meanwhile, lots and lots of language is happening, and a lot of it is artistic. Okay, so we accept that. And then digitalization comes along and gives us access to a sort of compositional tools and the tools that we associate with literature, and gives us the same sort of articulation of events that we appreciate as linguistic sound. So the what happens in the world of orality, and I'm aware that there sign languages exist and that we could do it in anything, but we evolved mainly to have language in orality. My references, by the way, just so you guys know, are Agamben. At the moment, I'm looking at Agamben a lot and finding a lot to be very useful in relation to somebody who's like a sort of philosophically inclined practitioner for these sort of ideas. So I'm not talking about something that's essential. I'm just talking about what happens to be the case, that our main engagement with what language means is via the oral, via the voice. And once machines are involved with the voice, then, and once we have writing tools that allow us to write with the voice, then what's to stop interesting people going to produce an orature rather than a literature? What's so great about letters, after all? They're just letters.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow. So I don't know. Teresa, do you want to say something?
See, I want to say something about this distinction between code and language, because I think that there is a distinction between code and language, which is that language, the the characteristic of language is that it is ambiguous. Words, we do not know precisely the meaning of any single word. Words are the meaning of the words are created collectively, are created in defined in context, and they are ambivalent. They are loaded with many different layers of meaning. We can consider, for example, Vygotsky vision on language, and according to Vygotsky, the two layers are together. The speaking language, for example, the fact that a word is something physical, it is related to an object, to a concept, but it is also something that is pronounced, that the child learn how to pronounce just because he repeats what his mother is saying. So the two layers, the layer of the categories, the layer of knowledge of Aristotelian knowledge, and the structure of knowledge, and the layer of the collective understanding and the collective production and the ambivalent production is mixed together. While in coding, this is not possible. One symbol must mean always the same thing. Otherwise, the machine is not working. The interpreter is not working, and the program is not stopping. So there are the fact that it's a symbol, it's made out of symbolic parts does not make the two the same. There are many layers of differences between the two. The problem, I think that the problem is that we can abandon. It is possible that we abandon the plurality, the multiplicity of the language in favor of the coding, because that's a problem. The Plato problem when he criticized the writing, no, is that when we use writing, we are abandoning the culture of orality, which means that we are abandoning a lot of things in favor of this tool for memorization, so that you can sort of have a conversation with someone that was born 200 years before. So it's a matter of balancing, but you are externalizing something in favor of something else, which is the internalization here with digital technology. It's not clear. We have to understand which is the internalization process that we are with which we are dealing now.
Totally agree.
Great. Actually, it's getting well, sort of late, so maybe we can think about wrapping up things a little bit. I was wondering, again, just as a go ahead.
I'm sorry to tell that we must close because we have another session that will start in 30 seconds.
Good. So
I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry. Or we can continue, but I just stopped the stream. So
yeah, sure.
I stopped the registration. We are
closing on a note of agreement, which is always a good moment to stop.
Anyway, have you stopped the stream or not?
Let me. Okay.